All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the Inevitable Podcast, first episode of 2022. And today I have an honor to have here Paulo Silveira. And if you heard that on the background, that's a massive thunderstorm happening right now in Sao Paulo. But we keep on going, no problem. As long as we have internet, we should be good. So I'm the founder and CEO of Atman. As some of you know, we are a different type of venture firm where every founder that's a part of our fund is also a partner in the fund, plus several other things that we'll be rolling out this year. And our mission, ultimately, it's always to enable and partner with inevitable people and provide them with leverage. And I think today's conversation is very, very exciting because Paulo is someone from the old guard and old school, tech and business entrepreneur in Brazil. Certainly a full stack founder, having built a business, having had an exit, as well as being an active participant in the local startup ecosystem. Paulo co-founded with his brother Grupo Alura, right? It's the largest educational platform in Brazil for folks that want to learn how to become a software engineer and multiple other disciplines within the spectrum of digital transformation. He's the CEO of that group. And they've taught over 500,000 people and have more than 1,300 courses in Portuguese, covering a pretty wide range of topics within digital business and technology. Paulo also went to school at USP. It's a very active angel investor and also podcaster. So always happy to have someone else that actually has recorded far more podcasts than I have and has a pretty well-known podcast in Portuguese for Brazilian founders. Thanks again, Paulo, for the time. It's a pleasure to have you here on the Inevitable Podcast.
Thank you, Pedro. Thank you for your time and giving me some space. It's always a pleasure to be part of a podcast and not being a host. It's quite amazing. Thank you.
No, my pleasure. And typically we combine here the story of your life with, current big questions that we have in our world. And starting with that, when was the first time that, you were hit with the path of having technology being an important part of your life? When you knew that, hey, I'm in front of something that's going to be present in my reality for a long time?
Yeah, I would say that just as maybe the majority of programmers and startup founders, I got access to to computers when I was still young, 8, 9 years old, when my father bought a computer that people who are not from Brazil will never know about it. It was called CP400. It was one of those copycats that during the 80s in Brazil, we had something called closed market or something like that. Do you know the name, Pedro? It's Reserva de Mercado in Portuguese, which is something that we were trying to protect our industries. And if you would like to sell computers or every kind of electronic and machines, you should build it in Brazil. So the companies needed to buy all the components around and create their own computers. What happened was that the companies were copycatting and recreating all the computers, the Z80 and all these kind of famous Apple II and famous computers and famous processors and selling them here. So my father bought a computer, and when he didn't have the money for that, and my mother got upset. And I think it's a pretty common story for those days. And I remember liking a lot coding in Logo. So I had this contact with all these things that Simon Papert did back then. And nowadays it's Scratch and so on, right? So, and with BASIC. So these were my first contact with computer programming languages and doing some basic games and small codes, not knowing exactly what I was doing. And after that, I got interested in computer games and video games. So I think it's pretty obvious. And I know I come from a lower middle class. I know that I had a lot of privileges having access to a computer back home, right?
Got it. And were you always entrepreneurial in terms of just being a builder, building things for yourself? When was the first time that you've made a little bit of money with something that you were building and you're like, I want to follow this entrepreneurial path?
Yeah, that's a funny question because I never saw myself as an entrepreneur or something like that. But after the company started, I started realizing that during my senior years and my school time, I was always trying to build a small community and leading small projects. Most of them, I was not going up to the end, right? Not finishing them. It's a shame. But nowadays, I can see that I was trying to build something. And I like this thrill. And I had I tried some stuff with my brother. My brother created a small company trying to buy and sell puppies. Yeah, real dogs.
I was gonna say not crypto cats or apes.
Yeah, no, the real ones. Yeah, not the coins. And it was during the internet boom in the 90s, in the end of the 90s. In Brazil, it was a mess, right? Almost no one had internet access. So, and we were also trying to buy and sell old magazines and stickers and so on. So we were trying to do some commerce and buy stuff, selling stuff, and so on.
So how was your professional life before you started Caelum?
So before creating my own school, right? Because we are a group of other companies. We are a real school nowadays online. I've always wanted to follow a path in the academic side, right? So I was doing my master's degree in computer science in combinatory and so on. And I was looking for a job as a professor. But at the time, I think I was not skilled enough and not, well, for the PhD and for being a professor, you need a lot of effort and to be really hardworking and studying really hard. And it's a really incredible job. And so my first steps were inside some consulting firms, so developing software for other companies. Mm-hmm. And right after that, I got a job at Sun Microsystems. So before Oracle bought them, nowadays they don't exist anymore, right? So they were the creators of Java, and I was really passionate about a specific language. This is another common story, right? So usually founders are totally passionate about the stack that they use, although they shouldn't be, but they are. And I was totally in love with Java, and I was pursuing a career at Sun Microsystems and doing stuff in Java and the open source community. And I started getting involved with all the ecosystem here in Brazil and abroad, especially with Java. Not only, but especially with Java. So I was a Java boy doing code and conferences, and maybe my first big step towards a real school was creating a big discussion forum here in Brazil. So nowadays we do have Facebook groups, Yahoo Answers, and especially Stack Overflow. But back then there weren't. So all the spaces for developers, they were what we call now decentralized, right? And It's really sad that we lost this. Maybe we will regain some aspect of this. And so I created a community which was called Guji. It's Java user groups in Portuguese.
So when you mean we've lost it, you mean just people meeting in person for events? Is that what you're saying because of the pandemic? Or
not only in person, I mean that online communities nowadays are totally dependent on Google, Facebook, and the big four or the biggest techs in the world. So we don't have the control anymore for creating a healthy, decentralized independence that are not subject to small and some details on their terms. So if you want to create something big, you will always depend on Telegram, WhatsApp, Facebook, Google, and so on. Back then, you could just launch your own forum and deploy it, and it was fine. No one was looking at incredible features and connection to huge social networks, and things are totally centralized nowadays. And I feel that time communities were being created in a more organic way without so much. The ads are not the problem, but we are not purpose driven anymore. You are just creating your own group so you can sell some stuff. And I'm not against it. I do this nowadays, but when you start directly this way, I think that the community is not as strong or as it could be.
Do you think that a portion of this sentiment, I'd say that, it's probably like the dilution of an overall camaraderie for the greater good that started with open source might have migrated to crypto? I know it's like
yes, I think so. I think
right?
so. I think that during the first 10 years in this century, right, we had two big movements in software, and they are agile and the open source. So these communities were that some like the underdogs, the big companies, they didn't believe in open source and agile. I was like, people were making jokes about open source and agile, and nowadays they are totally mainstream. No one questions it, right? You don't have a company or a startup that will say, hey, here we don't use agile and you can't use open source. 15 years ago, this was the reality, right?
Yeah, well, I would say that probably Microsoft is by me the top 3 open source contributors in the world today, and we've invested.
They just bought GitHub. It's totally amazing because 15 years ago they were just saying, "Hey, no, we will not join Linux, open source. We will not open our codes. We don't want you to join open platform and I don't know protocols and patterns and so on." Nowadays, it's the opposite, right? And your comparison with the crypto scene, that's perfect because what I think is that in 10 years, all the huge banks and companies, they will treat crypto and DeFi just as agile and open source nowadays. They will say, hey, look, we just do it and it's normal and everybody's doing it. But nowadays there is this big, huge resistance, and the ones who are embracing this right now, they will have a huge advantage, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that there's also quite a lot of money to be made in open source, and it's kind of surprising. I mean, that's why probably it took them a little longer, but made a few investments in that space with Rocket Check, CodeCov, and GitLab as well. So a few and a few others. So it's but I think it's interesting, your perspective when we're talking about just overall camaraderie and collaboration, and probably like the projects usually start that way because the best businesses starts as they always start as toys with founders solving their own problems, but then once it scales, it gets to a point where the incentives, I mean, fundamentally they just have to change, right? But going back, I guess, to switching gears a little bit to your story. So you guys started right as an in-person programming course. How did the business blossom into something so large, and when was the moment where you've decided to actually start and you took that jump? You know, there's a time where like you got to put, you know, your reputation and risk and capital on the line. So when did the idea came about, and then when did you actually decide to start the company?
Yeah, we started at 2004 because I was not allowed at Sun. That's exactly the story. I was not allowed at Sun Microsystems to teach any kind of open source, almost any kind of open source technology or agile software development, because Sun Microsystems was not making money on that. So that was how all the big companies were thinking that time. Maybe Google was already ahead. And so I decided, hey, I need to create a school where we can teach what we see that the market is using right now. And that's how we launched this brand, which is called Caelum. It was in person, right? The offline, brick and mortar, traditional school, small school, computer school. But at that time, you need to remember that, hey, learn how to code, you can be a developer. This was not the hype. No one was talking about that's a cool career. It's very well paid. There are a lot of opportunities 20 years ago. So at that time, the course that we had in person were only for people who were already on the market, right? So not advanced course, but they were not intro level or basic level ones. And that's how we started. And from 2004 to 2010, we just grew organically, like launching other sites and other cities, right? At Rio and Brasilia, so the biggest cities in Brazil, economical centers. And at 2010, my brother told me that, hey, we should take a look at online learning. And we got scared about that idea because, well, you know the drill. That's exactly the innovator's dilemma. Without that, if we can offer something online for half of the price or even less, we will cannibalize our own market. We were growing, and it was not a good idea for us at that time to launch something that could eat our own lunch, right? And at the same time, 2010 in Brazil, we had what? We had 2007 or 2008, the iPhone. At 2010, 2011, when we launched the online version, no one in Brazil had access to online videos on demand in the desktop. And on the mobile, it was just a joke here in Brazil, right? Mm-hmm. So it was really a bet. And then we launched Caelum Online, right? With only content that we were not providing face-to-face. So we were just like Kodak and scared about everything. We got scared. Hey, just launch all the content that we don't think it's our 80-20, and let's see how it goes. So I see right now, it's quite easy. Well, after everything happens, right? I can just tell you that we did a mistake. We should have moved forward much faster, and deployed all exactly the same course that we had, the face-to-face, online, cheaper version with lower margins, exactly what the book says. And at 2013, things were getting bigger in the online version. So we decided to launch a different brand because things were getting a little bit complicated. If you take a look at General Assembly and others, that they do offer online, offline, part-time, longer courses, grad school, and so on. It's quite a mess. I like to compare. It's just so many call to actions, right? And so many products at the same page. And here in Brazil, we have a typical form of restaurants like the churrascaria, right? The barbecue here in Brazil, where they offer some of this kind of meat house. They also offer pizza and sushi, and it's exactly the same analogy. You need to have a product and be laser focused on your CTAs, and say, hey, look here, it's a subscription model yearly, and you have access right now today. This, and that's the conditions. Instead of having, hey, you can have the in-person on Monday in São Paulo for this much, or all you can need access right now. It's just too confusing. So we launched a separate brand, also because we thought that the customers would be a different audience. In the end, they are quite the same. And so everything started to grow a lot more. 1 year or 2 years after we changed the brand, we lost some momentum when we launched the new brand because, you don't have the authority.
Yeah.
Even if you have the powered by, it doesn't matter. People know you by the other name.
Do you think separating the brands, though, was a bad idea, or would you have done differently?
That's also a pretty good question, because at first we thought it was a mistake. At 2014, we were saying, hey, people, they don't understand, they trust the older brand and so on. But after some time, we thought we made a right decision. Maybe the other option, good option, would be closing at 2013 all the face-to-face, the brick and mortar operation, and focusing only on the online business. But it was much smaller than the face-to-face. Mm-hmm. So it would be really a crazy idea, and I'm not so brave like this. So it would be really hard to do something like that.
Got it. Oh, interesting. And today, is it 100% online, or have you guys resumed in-person courses? And not just that, but what's your vision for learning in the future?
Yeah, unfortunately not. We will not resume for the short term because, all the COVID situation. So we were, before COVID, we were something like 15% face-to-face, 85 online. And during COVID, this was down to almost zero. And so we did not resume. And I think that there will be space for the face-to-face, even if we try always. You will see a lot of people talking about hard skills versus soft skills. That hard skills you can use pure online learning, and soft skills are much better discussing in group and face-to-face. But I really think that even the hard skill, the hardest one, you will have some benefits sitting down and using a table and pen and talking to your professor directly. And yes, I do still prefer the face-to-face learning, right? So maybe it's a generational thing, but I think there will be space, of course, for a more premium version for different situations and so on. And that's it. Nowadays, we are not resuming, but we are launching our undergrad and grad courses also. And some of them will need, because of the regulation here in Brazil, we will need some time face-to-face.
Okay. And so you've been in the educational business for technology for quite a long time, right? And so you probably, far before you started, then you start seeing the venture-backed coding boot camps, as well as the trend of ISAs, right? So what's your take on both ultimately? I've never understood. For a while when I was in San Francisco, I worked out of Galvanize, and I've also worked out at General, what's the name of that other one? General
Assembly.
General Assembly, that's right. And I never understood why they raised so much money, because there was that combination of real estate and education, but and none of them actually were very good exits for the investors, although they've strongly capitalized these businesses. And the jury's still out on ISAs, although I am quite bullish on that model if legally well done and done with the correct incentives. So just would love to get your take on both, I guess, if you see that coding boot camps are a potential venture backable business or not, and then if your take overall on ISAs. And for those that don't know, ISAs are just a form of I wouldn't call it like equity ownership, but maybe revenue sharing in the future, in case you graduate someone with certain skills, they end up getting a job and you get a cut of that by charging a lower cost or sometimes just giving it for free. It's just a new incentive that has been created in the last few years.
Yeah, that's a good point. I would also add the marketplace, right? The education marketplace. So my personal view, I do not understand the venture capital pretty good. So it's a personal view, right, Pedro? You can correct me and maybe you have a totally different opinion, or anyone that...
No, I wouldn't. I prefer that we disagree. I am a very pro disagreement person because I think that's how you learn and grow. And so ultimately, that's what good debate is for,
Yeah. So nowadays, my opinion, and it's not only mine, is that education, even the edtech, if you are not a tool, if you are really into education or creating content, selling content, buying content, and you have students that are learning using your startup or your company, the growth factor is not as big as what VCs are expecting. You can't put more money and get more students and making them reaching their goals as fast and as the VCs want. I like to compare this. I am a school, right? You don't have school or colleges where you just build them as quickly as possible and then you just put 10,000 students in the same college, and after 1 month they have all the skills that they need, and after 6 months you can have another round and put another 100,000 students inside your school.
You can't have a baby in 4 months, right? Doesn't matter how much cash you put on.
Exactly. It's not. We are not a fintech where you can have more transactions faster. Until my brother likes to say that, until we don't have a matrix style downloadable content to our brains, you can't say that your startup will revolutionize your learning experience. You can't. All these boot camps that says, hey, look, we do what your college degree does in 4 years, we do in 3 months. They are just lying, because you simply can't do that. There is no way you can. Otherwise, we would be learning 3 months and just throwing away every single college degree, right? Yes, maybe you do have a friend that studies at MIT and he learned how to code in 4 months when he was 80 years old. But this is just an anecdote, just a cool story to tell. This is not how real people work, study, and so on. So what I see is just like schools and hospitals, exactly the same thing. When you say health tech, you can't cure a disease 10 times faster than the other hospital does. Yes, maybe you can have less mistakes and so on, a better people, better approach, better pricing, but you can't just add a lot of patients 10 times more, 100 times more, and say, hey, look, we will just discover the cure for this kind of disease for all these people in 10 times faster than our competitor. That's not how it works, right? So I'm very skeptical about anyone promising really strong results in short term and doing this in a scalable fashion, blitzscaling, or in a really strong and quick rounds. You can just see what happened to Lambda, what happened to Udacity after they opened their offices here in Brazil, and so on. When you try, and Udacity has great content, great people, a great team here in Brazil. But doing this as fast as you can, just like crazy, and putting students and burning money and so on, I think it's not well suited to e-learning. Maybe if you're telling me about Marketplace, Udemy, it's a different situation. But for boot camps, for the ISA, the ones that are doing better are the ones that are growing steadily, just like me. Just like me. I'm doing 100% year over year this year. And I already have a good size. We have done like $15 million 2020, and now $30 million, almost $30 million 2021, which is pretty good for Brazil, for a Brazilian company. 50%. And, you know, I've been doing this for 15 years. It's not quick, like in 2 years, we have the same amount of students, outcomes, professors, and especially community, because this is totally linked to the passion economy, everything that Li Jing said to us and created all these articles. So it takes a lot of time.
Yeah, absolutely. My view on it, actually, we agree, because I have the deals I've directly been involved with for the past 7 years, done probably a little over 40, but across the board in terms of companies in which I was on the investment team and saw these opportunities, around 300, and probably have seen maybe 15,000, 20,000 startups in the past decade or so. I've done one investment in education, which was a company that used to be called AdmitHub. It was basically a automated bot for college admissions in the US. If you think about, well, there's this big thing called the summer melt, which ultimately are students at risk that ended up not coming back for the summer. And the admissions offices in colleges in the US that aren't as well funded, they actually needed digital transformation for automation of simple tasks. And so it's a SaaS business with a tool, you know, solving a problem that we felt that, you know, it was large enough. That being said, I agree with you that, you know, you cannot have the baby in 4 months versus 9, and the way that venture works might not necessarily be conducive even to how fast we absorb knowledge. It could be online or it could be offline, unless I think you create a different type of incentive. So I am more interested in the ISA model only if it's done right in a market that has quite a lot of scarcity, meaning I think Lambda is not as interesting as the local version of it that we have in Brazil, right? Tribe. So yeah. I think that there's a difference there when you look at the incentives. In my opinion, I think Tribe can be a venture backable business, but Lambda a little harder, in my opinion.
Yeah. I also think that I have a specific problem with Lambda and with their CEO and all the kind of growth marketing and how they use the numbers and they promote themselves. I think it's, well, I just don't like it. I think that the ones that are doing this in Brazil, they are much better, in a much better situation. I don't know how fast they can scale. I have a relationship with Mateus from Tribe and the other ones. And
which, by the way, is a genius. He's one of the smartest people I've ever met. I just as a side note, but yeah.
Yeah, very well prepared, and really humble, something that other CEOs are not. And he also knows that there is a challenge, scale at the right speed. Otherwise, you will not be able to achieve the goals that you need for your students. It's not a matter of money. You need time for these students themselves and to prove it and so on, and make you don't have this kind of speed that you have the very short cycles in a traditional startup. So you need much more time. The cycle is really long for the students. So I think that's the problem. That's what is happening here. It's a different situation when you have a SaaS business. Everyone tries to label me as a SaaS because I have the subscription model, because they want me to say that I have a better multiple, right? But the truth is that I am an online school. It's a different business. Although I do offer it as a subscription model for the B2B and having all the NDR, the retention metrics pretty well, I do work like this, but I'm a school. I'm a school. So there are a lot of things here that should not be faster, because otherwise we will not deliver what the students, not the companies, the students are expecting.
Yeah, absolutely. And as a correction, the other business I have invested is a company called Platzi, which you probably know as well.
Yeah,
we were seed investors there when I was at Funders Club, and they're incredible founders. Beautiful story. What they've been doing for people's lives throughout the Spanish-speaking LATAM is amazing. I've seen some of those stories as well. But certainly when it comes to valuing the startup and the multiples that you get, it's different because of this exactly this point that you're talking about. I guess the story can go both ways. So yeah.
And Platzi, Freddy, I also keep in touch with him, and he also has exactly the same long story in education, in the community. He's building something in the long run. It was not like the other startup stories, right? So it's exactly the same thing. Yeah.
Yes. No, they're very committed to that mission, and it takes, of course, a certain type of investor to fully subscribe to being long-term greedy, I would say. But it's interesting when you think about just overall talent acquisition, and even the gap that we have today with the velocity that we're seeing with digital transformation, plus now with every company being remote. Have you had problems yourself, or even with the companies that you've invested, right? Like, it's a pretty common thing we're seeing, that there used to be a geographical arbitrage pre-pandemic in terms of salaries for software engineers. That was a great thing, in which we would invest in dollars into some companies in LATAM. You could still hire pretty high quality talent, but they weren't making San Francisco salaries. And what we've been observing now is that you have the bottom 25% sometimes of talent, or the top 25% of talent, migrating quite fast, operating as mercenaries on both sides of the spectrum, either being poached, or if they get a bad review and they get a little angry, they just go and get a job at Twitter that would gladly pay someone that to just do a minor job, but that's needed because the company is so big. And ultimately, the salary that they're making locally, depending on where they're based, it's transformational. It's really life-changing. They could be actually one of the wealthiest people in their circle
cities.
and their cities. And it creates a problem to the point, this is absurd, and I don't recommend this for any founder, but I saw a founder in Brazil saying the following: now I'd rather hire software engineers who don't speak fluent English or can't sell themselves really well, just so I avoid losing them. Certainly, it's a useless way of solving this problem. But first, I wanted to understand if you're also seeing that, and what's your take for what's going to happen in the future. I believe this arbitrage is probably completely gone. And it would be very hard to get back to where we were before. So the only way, at least that I've been advising founders, is that ultimately you got to raise more money to be more competitive, but ultimately hire people that they're going to be making enough money to have a comfortable life, but also make sure you're building a great company, so people want to work for that business, right, and for you. It's the only viable answer that I see today, because there's a breaking point that you can't fight if you're a startup, the salaries of large organizations.
Yes. Oh, I think it's a good, for me, that's exactly the dream, right, Pedro? Because nowadays our students can see that there are huge opportunities. I just want to remember that most of these positions abroad, especially in the top tier companies, are for senior positions or 10 years or plus in experience. And not only you need English, you need some different skills about learning, thinking, and puzzles, and computer science, algorithms, and so on. So this is not something for everyone right now. It takes time to have access to this kind of opportunities. For sure, there are some marketplace companies doing remote jobs for simple skills, as implementing Figmas, as HTML, and so on. Yes, there are, but most of the great chances and really salaries that are totally different are for senior positions. So that's the first thing here. So the companies that are suffering the most are the big ones, the fintechs, the really complex ones that need really some kind of skill, that you need resilience and 99 uptime percent and so on. So you see that you are losing most of these talents for this kind of job positions. And my advice, and I would say that the only option right now, is that you need to hire many more junior developers than you think. Because every single company that is heavily dependent on tech will have their own school, university, or their own process of onboarding for months, and then creating some kind of road. So the seniority of these new entry positions, they will be faster recognized as seniors, as and other positions, because there are no other options. This is not the best idea. This is the only idea. That's the only way that the other companies outside Europe and the US and maybe China, they can compete. You need to hire some talent that will be willing to create a business with you, just what you said, committed to your cause, stock options, and so on. Because people that are hired when they just got out of school, out of their courses, boot camps, and so on, they have this passion relation with their first job, their first company.
Yes.
And if you can create this relation good enough, they will think about it before just taking, as you use it, mercenary. I think it's just too strong, because it's just life. It's their merit, right? And before accepting this kind of job offers, they will think, hey, Pedro gave me this kind of opportunity here. Maybe he will give me even more if the company grows. Of course, it's a bet.
No, but that's the missionary answer. That's like it's the traditional John Doerr poster. It's like you hire missionaries, not mercenaries. At least the behavior I've observed is people do flip jobs sometimes for not enough. I mean, not much, but you know. But I do like your approach though. It's very refreshing. It's just saying, look, hire as many junior people as possible, as fast as possible, and propel them with a career path for growth.
Exactly.
Right. That's it. I certainly subscribe also to the missionary aspect of the first formal job. I've had many little jobs when I moved to the US 12 years ago, but the first formal one was when I joined SendGrid, and I thought I was changing the world through an SMTP API, which in the end, I mean,
that's great. Your boss was just amazing, right? Because at that time it saved a lot of lives, right? Because SMTP and sending email, it was just a job done internally, and you had to handle yourself all the mess. And of course, this helped a lot of people, but maybe a lot of technical people, not the personal lives of people, right? But that's exactly what
Yeah.
I know you, Pedro, because of SendGrid and so on. So you are just as passionate about SendGrid as you were before. So take a look at the relationship that they created with you at that time. It is lasting even today. That's quite amazing. That's how you create a. If someone just offered you a job that back then, you would say, hey, no, because I'm totally in love here and so on. Of course, I'm not trying to create, saying that you need to create a reason and make people fall in love with you. That's not the deal here, because you can't create these fake emotions, right? It wouldn't last.
That's
But
right.
you need to find something and create a relation with your employees, and purpose driven and so on. This is real. This is real.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I am grateful to this date because as an immigrant that moved here, right, not having many connections for the folks that believed in my potential and the ability to grow over time into that company, certainly it transformed, my relationship with the US, my career, everything. So certainly what you're saying is important. And I think that have you ever thought about having, for instance, if you guys are teaching people and they want to join startups, even educating certain developers or your students about how to think through stock options and understand the value of equity and so forth? Because if I don't know if your students are typically doing the course paid by their own employers or if they're in a transition period and so forth, but that might be an interesting thing, right? Like just to corroborate with your argument, which I think it's very correct.
Yeah, I never thought about it, but it makes totally sense because I have this kind of problem, right? When we give some stock options to someone here in the company, you have two kind of results, right? There are some people that just get it and they do understand it fully, and they realize that you are creating a partnership, a real partnership for the company. Other people just say, hey, doesn't matter if it doesn't make any difference in their lives or how they deal with the company. And I just don't get it. Why two different persons, they have such different reactions when they do work side by side, quite the same performance and so on, and someone can see the potential and the other can't? Well, I gave exactly the same explanation, right? Of course, it's like a 30-minute meeting and so on. I think that here in Brazil, we are not educated about stock options, RSUs, Phantom stocks, and so on. I see people leaving Nubank, leaving Quinto Andar, and they just put on the table a lot of stock options, an enormous amount, and they don't get it that they are just leaving and that's such amount of money. I try to explain, and they say, "Hey, but I need to pay right now." And well, I don't know. In the US, that's not the case, right? Almost everyone do understand about it, and they get it when the numbers, the possibilities, the access, and the growth phases, and so on. Maybe it's time for the Brazilian market to be educated.
Yeah, I mean, that's also, if you ever wanted to do a module in Portuguese and collaborate over that, I'd be very interested just to educate people at large, how to negotiate and think through that in an open way, just to continue to have more incentives and alignment. I'd be open to collaborating on something like that because it's, so I would have less calls about it, because sometimes people don't know and they call and it's like, it's very laborious. So that's something that I think we could all benefit from. Just send them to an online course, how to think about stock options as an employee,
Yeah, I always say here that the capitalism failed so much in so many ways, but stock options is one of the best parts of it, right? Because it's really sharing something with your employees that can really make a huge difference, and you're taking exactly the same risk as your boss as your C-level. So everyone is on the same boat or something like that. It's the closest thing that you can get to that, right?
Yeah, I've also noticed, I mean, Brazilians are just so creative. Sometimes I've seen also people that do embrace it and understand the value start calling themselves partners, as if like the startup is a law firm. I think that that's like a fascinating, it's a positive thing. It's a good thing. And I've seen them putting it on their LinkedIn bios or Twitter bios that like, you know, hey, I mean, I don't know, I'm a vice president and partner of, that's a good thing. You know, you want everyone to operate as an owner and understand the value of their equity, because for me, you know, I mean, cash has no value, and it's just a matter of you selling your time. The only way where you can actually find value is through equity and ownership, you know, and build wealth, basically, right? Excellent. Changing gears a little bit, Paulo. When did you start angel investing?
Well, it was back in 2016, and a friend who is a CEO of a fintech here in Brazil, and he asked me, "Hey, I have this young guy here who is trying to create his second startup. Would you like to talk to him? Because he had already received a round, my friend. So he already understood a little bit about VC, and I was just like stock option and everything else, no idea. And he asked me, I liked the guy. He's Lincoln from ID Wall. Nowadays they are 300.
We've invested together in this business. Great.
Yeah. So he's right now 300 employees in Brazil, doing great. So my first was really a success back then. And after that, I think I've done 2 or 3 other angel investment in 2017. So the second one or the third one was directly with you through the syndicate, right? Through a traditional AngelList syndicate that you have managed. So it was in PiFi, it was the third one, I think, and which was really, really amazing. And after that, I got a VC round for my company and a secondary, and then I just started deploying a lot of money, more than I should. And because I think that as I am in the tech community, being an angel investor for me, I always joke that it's like buying an expensive B2B lead. Maybe in some years, this company will be such big that they will also be one client of my company. It's just a joke, but you know, this has a network effect. Maybe not this company, but the other companies that are their clients will be connected to me because, you know, right? Some angels, when they get some kind of size, they get really well known in the community and things get faster to you. The deal flow, not the deal flow for the companies, for the startups, but also for your own company. And for hiring, I can hire better right now because people know me from angel investments and so on. So it's something really powerful when you have this direct investment in startups. And of course, nowadays I have 50. I think I have some kind of connection with 15 of them. So 30% of them, I have some kind of recurring meetings and connections, and I can say that I helped them in some way. But the other ones, I'm totally not aware of what exactly is going on. Or, well, I know because I do receive that kind of Y Combinator emails that they say what happened the last month and so on. So it's not my full-time job, I don't have this kind of connection with all of them.
And, but that's incredible. There's quite a large portfolio for the time that you've been investing, and ultimately, how do you underwrite the investments? I suspect that you get mostly through the community and personal referrals, but then how do you make decisions? In your opinion, what is the ideal type of founder to partner with?
Well, as an angel, I don't have this kind of skills that you have, and like creating some memos with numbers and benchmarks and calculating the TAM using the other markets and so on, and taking a look at the other benchmarks to see if there were some kind of exits per user, per revenue, per GMV, and so on. I won't do some kind of heavy work like this. So I have a group of 3 angels. So this friend of mine who introduced me to Lincoln, and Lincoln himself, so my first investment. So we do the investments together, usually, not always. And I use their skills and they use mine when I can help about community, B2C, especially B2C, and so on. So I leave all the math and KPIs and metrics to the others. They are better than me. But what I see myself are the founders, how they are committed, how excited they are. And I must confess that I also see if they know my work, they know about my work. So did they have the time to look at my profile, take a look at what other company I have invested, talk with someone that knows myself, and did they hear my podcast and so on? Because, that's exactly when I hire someone, I think that the worst thing that can happen is you see that the candidate don't know what the company is about. He doesn't know what Alura does, or just a little bit. And some stuff that was just at the homepage or in an about page, you need to know. That's exactly. So Dantas always say this to me, that the founder, the startup, he or she needs to want you as bad as you want to invest on them. Because if there is no connection here, I don't want to be running and chasing startups to say, hey, I really want to invest on you, and so on. Maybe it happened twice, maybe, but I think that this is a sign that you shouldn't.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the dynamics are very similar to dating, so it needs to be mutual, and you're ultimately getting into a marriage that very hard to divorce. So ultimately, passing the ethos that we've developed inside Atman for that, we call it funeral alignment. So do we want to partner with this person until they die? And if they died, or when I die, like, would I want them to show up at my funeral, right? And also thinking, if you're not married, in my case at least, would I want them at my wedding? Because probably it's the only 2 times in your life, hopefully, that you get everyone. I mean, maybe you can organize more, but just to get everyone that kind of matters in your life in the same place. And for true partnership, I would say in the earliest of stages, which is what we do, we partner with people that are super fucking intense, right? It is an unnatural thing to just build these multi-billion-dollar businesses in such a short period of time. It takes a certain type of personality, so you're always connected with them at a personal and professional level. At least I like to work that way as an investor. So I've carried babies of founders I've invested in, go to their weddings, know their families, their parents. Just it's such a better way of building lasting relationships with inevitable people, versus when you're just I hate when I see VCs talking, oh yeah, we're placing a bet, or well, we're doing a deal. And over time, I think the further you go up the stack, the more that you start facing these types of investors. And I'm not saying that the decision should be an emotional one, because you want to have a good combination actually of rationality and emotion. But in the end, you're partnering with that team and those individuals, and it's fundamentally important that that we both align in values and principles, and that the relationship over time gets better. Because you 3 years from now will be a different person than myself, and then if we work together, it's important that we are evolving almost at a similar pace. So these are certain things that we really take under consideration. I like to spend, for instance, for a first call, ideally, it's either a 20-minute meeting or a 2-hour meeting. That's typically how I like to do it. And in that 2-hour meeting, it's so much more important to understand how is it that that person grew up and what truly motivates them in order to take such a difficult choice in life, which is building a company. And having, right, the levels of expectations that come with venture financing. So certainly I think that it has to be mutual. And I have also participated in opportunities in which we were lucky to be there, but had to force our way in. And the longevity of these relationships, it's typically, it's not the same. It doesn't feel the same. You're not as excited. I don't know. I like to say that we want to be the first phone call in the apocalypse or the first phone call in the moment of celebration. Everything else in between, figure it out or call other people. Because we can take, we can hopefully be the best version of ourselves in our worst days, and it's exciting to celebrate the wins. So I agree with you in that regard.
And this is personal. You said it's not an emotional decision, but it depends on alignment and maybe what is not ideal for me investing, it is for someone else, and this will be good for the other one. It's not the right or wrong, right? There is no such. It's not so clear like this, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So as we approach a little bit over the 1 hour mark, just to start wrapping up. Getting a little more personal, Paulo, I've always liked to ask, almost for my personal benefit, because I enjoy productivity hacks across the board, and even just learn about curious things from other people. So anything that basically, what's your ideal morning routine? That's typically a question that we always ask here.
Yeah, I do have a morning routine nowadays that I have. Well, it's an interesting question, because nowadays I do have it, and it's something new for me. I was always proud about waking up at 11 o'clock a.m. and going to sleep at 3 or 4 a.m. as a coder. I thought that this was cool. I was a night guy, although a nerd, and no sports, no social competition, and so on. And after having babies, and after discovering sports, and this was when I was like 34, 35 years old. And
how old are you now?
Changed. I'm 42
You are a very well-preserved individual, my friend. Nice.
And this changed a lot for me, right? I was the nerd, the computer video game nerd, so I never got into sports. I thought that this was just like a gift that either you are born with or otherwise you are just sitting down. I skipped all classes on soccer and so on. I hate soccer. And
yeah, I hated them as well. I used to be I was bullied in middle school, because I consider myself a nerd as well, and basically just that I was always the last kid to be picked. It was kind of like the burden, in the physical education school. And
me too.
Always had now I wear contacts, but always had big glasses and just wasn't able to move properly well. But martial arts though were always a part of my life. I did 9 years of judo, 4 or 5 years of karate, and
cool.
just punching people and getting punched. I think really helps your character. It gave me discipline and courage as a nerd. To not take those moments where you're socially excluded that seriously, right? But I still, could not care less about soccer. Not even in the World Cup. I mean, I kind of like it because of the social aspect of it.
Yeah.
But
Exactly.
soccer not important for me at all. If I'm not wishing that in any way, shape, or form. But if every soccer player became paraplegic tomorrow, nothing would change for me.
That's exactly my case. So after having the babies and discovering, well, I will confess, I'm a little bit ashamed, but it was CrossFit. So CrossFit brought me to sports. I know that's another story.
That's fine. It's a whole cult thing. And people like, look, I've tried CrossFit classes when I lived in Boulder. And I didn't like it because of the cultish aspect of it. But I think it's great. It's an awesome business. It changed the life of so many people. It's a fine thing. I don't understand why there's so much hate on the CrossFitters.
And Pedro, the social skill, the marketing, and the community thing in CrossFit, all startups need to take a look on it. Because, well, I'm taking off here. But just to give you an example, if someone who is listening to us has never been to a CrossFit box, the difference from the gym is that the first thing that you do there is to write your name right on the whiteboard, and people will call you by your name. So this is the first thing. This is personal. This is special economy. This is community, and not being a number or just someone using the equipment over there. And you have the timed box, right? So you have 1 hour and you will be there every single day, exactly the same time. You will create a group. You will know other people that are in the same situation that yourself. There is all the gamification that you put on the board. It's when I saw that, every day I was bringing ideas to the marketing team and saying, hey, look, we need to create this kind of space and putting people in contact. So in the online schools, one of the big challenges is how to create engagement among the students and creating friendships, because in brick and mortar schools, you create a friendship. That's cool. You have colleagues, right? The online business, even the cohorted ones, the bootcamp ones, it's a little bit harder. So the CrossFit brought me these ideas and waking up earlier and doing exercise. And after 1 year, I got interest in the rings. It's one of the exercises in CrossFit. And I found a teacher on calisthenics, right? And I've done calisthenics for the last 5 years. And after COVID, I'm now doing gym, but I keep all the handstand, the rings, and the calisthenics things. And so my morning routine is to grind my own coffee and drink a lot of coffee, really a lot of coffee all day long, and finding different ways of doing coffee and looking at bean to bar chocolates, Brazilian chocolates from different rivers and communities, and going to the gym. So this helped me a lot. But to be honest, and I do read a little bit about the things that you're writing, I don't have a work-life balance. I'm not proud, but I don't have. Things are all mixed up. Every second, I'm doing 2-3 different things at the same time. And I can't say that I don't enjoy it. I do enjoy it. I like being hard worker, workaholic. I like it. And I can't lie, right? But I do have routines and times and schedules, and my calendar, my Google Calendar is not very well, but well organized. So I think the discipline that you had in judo, it's something that I'm looking for myself and for my daughters. I'm really afraid that they don't like sports as I didn't. So I'm trying to push them into sports before it's too late.
No, that's awesome. I think that, a few points there. The number one thing is that anyone that I know that has built anything meaningful, there was no balance. I think that ultimately the people that we're talking about, that are talking about work-life balance, I'm not so sure if that makes a lot of sense. I do think that it's important that you're working on something that has enough meaning for you so that for the most part, work feels like play. There are parts of, I love maybe 80%, 85% of everything related with what we do at Atman. There's 20% that I dislike. I'm not interested in, preparing for taxes or getting audited or not everything is pleasant, but the vast majority is truly special. And you're always on the job, right? Because what we do is so personal as well that it doesn't disconnect. At least that's why I enjoy venture so much, because it's about who you are and your reputation. And I think that it's if it works, it's fine. For me, at least, what I've learned is having a true knowledge of who I am, and then with that self-awareness, I don't burn out. I've been hospitalized twice through just pushing it to a limit that it was not healthy, and that taught me lessons about the importance of then nutrition, sleep, exercise, spirituality, mindfulness, and all that stuff. So I think that there's just a part of me that likes to work so much, and it's so violent that I had to create all these frameworks so I can live a healthy life and don't break myself, right? And that's the when you have this good balance with your body, your spirit, and the work that you do, everything integrates in a better way. Getting older helps as well, right? Or like you said, certainly having kids. Have you found any interesting strategies in terms of how to convince kids to enjoy sports or get out of looking at screens?
Well, they don't use screens, although they are not interested in sports neither. So it's not this. It's not the screen is not the problem, and I don't have the answer, not yet.
Perfect. All right, Paulo, I appreciate your time. This was a wonderful conversation. I don't know if you have any additional remarks, but really appreciated your time and learning from you. It's always a pleasure.
Thank you, Pedro. It was really nice to talk to you, and I'm really grateful to you and your team bringing me to angel investment and connecting me to the ecosystem.
No, it's our pleasure. Let's do more together in the future. Thank you so much, Paulo. We appreciate you, and see you on the next episode. Glad to be back here in 2022.
See you.
All right.